Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I finally decided to do a sit down and chat video and answer my probably most asked question on social media platforms and my blog, which is what are my most favorite supplies for watercolors and why? What do I use and why do I use it? And if somebody's a beginner, where should they start? What kind of brushes or paints should they pick? And I've decided to finally gather up all of this stuff and go through it one by one and hopefully answer most of your questions. Now, a disclaimer before we begin, none of this is sponsored. This is just all of my stuff that I have accumulated over the years, and I did not buy this all at once. I was sort of acquiring all this stuff gradually, and by no means am I saying that you need to own all the stuff or get all of it right away. And actually for the beginners, I would specifically point out to get as little of stuff as you can and get as most out of it as you can when you're just starting out. And then you're gonna get a chance to slowly sort of build up your art collection. And then maybe get more expensive supplies or supplies that are not really necessary at first, but you're curious about trying them out. So hopefully I'll answer all your questions, but if you still have any questions after this video, please leave them in the comment section below and I will try to get to them as soon as I can. So let's start with paper. But I'm gonna go through these all one by one because for me they all serve different purposes, and for you probably will too. So I'm gonna start with sort of the beginner level of supplies and what do you need, what do you don't need. So the most used paper that I would recommend to all beginner artists is this Canson XL watercolor series. And this comes in pads. This paper comes also in notebooks if that's more convenient for you. And I really like this paper because it's a 140-pound paper, which is a thick, nice quality paper. Doesn't really buckle up as much, though I wouldn't recommend doing really heavy washes without sizing the paper first. And you size the paper by wetting the paper completely, then taping it to a board and letting it dry. That way it's not going to buckle as much. But if you're doing just small studies, this paper is more than enough. And I don't know if it comes in different textures. I've always got one cold press texture. And it has very subtle texture, well, just like a regular cold press paper. And I'm gonna link some of the tutorials that I do in watercolors with different paints and different subject matters, and you will see that in almost all of them I'm using this paper and it gives great results for daily use. And also if I'm working on some commissions for my clients, I often use this paper just for color swatches, so that I'm not wasting my more expensive paper when I'm just trying out colors for my mixes. And I've just ripped a small piece. And even if you did a painting that you don't like, you can just rip it up and use the other side for these color swatches. So if you're just starting out, this is my advice for you. Start with this paper. Another one that is sort of more on the affordable size is this Strathmore watercolor series paper, and I recommend the 400 series because the higher the number, the better the paper is. And this is just the oversized pad. This one is 11 by 15. Just got it out of experiment. It's also cold press paper. but it does come in different textures, and they also have smaller notebooks. Also 400 series, 140-pound paper, and this one, is it cold press? Yeah, this one is cold press. And this is just a nice sort of travel size sketchbook, and you can see the bushes and trees, the watercolor tutorial that I did. This is available on my blog. I unfortunately don't have a video, but you can check it out on my blog. So the Strathmore series is another sort of a more affordable version for watercolor paper. If you want to step it up a little bit, I would recommend the Arches watercolor pads. This paper is cheaper than the Arches regular watercolor paper, just because it's not glued on all of the edges. Because the pads, I'm sorry for the reflection, this one is a new pad, I haven't opened it yet. Their pads actually glued on all of the sides, but this paper is just as good. It just comes sort of as a pad like this with separate loose pieces. I mean, they're not loose, they glued just on one side, but you can easily rip them out. And of course, this one is my probably top favorite paper for watercolors. Of course, it's more expensive, so don't go after expensive supplies if you're just starting out. Buy what you can afford and try to get the most out of it. Another good quality and not too expensive paper is by Fluid, and this one is 140 pounds, also cold press watercolor paper. And this does come in these series, they really do come in a lot of options. You can get bright white, you can get natural white, you can get all of the textures, and they also differ by the quality of the paper, so you can still buy the cheaper paper by this brand. And the difference is quality is not even that noticeable to me. It was so good. This one is 100% cotton paper, so it's a little more sustainable to a lot of layering with watercolors. It doesn't really start crumbling, not the crumbling, but sometimes when you just work on one area a lot, it just starts looking very overworked, and you can see little bits and pieces of the paper separating from the paper. Hopefully that makes sense. But that happens on a lot of cheap paper, and one way to avoid it is to look for 100% cotton paper whenever you can. It does come in affordable prices by different brands, so again, I highly recommend looking for 100% cotton paper. And this is also, this paper is glued on, have a lot of stuff. This paper is glued on two sides, so it holds paper together to prevent buckling, and you just rip it off. I would recommend to grab like a ruler or something and just pick it up from the sides and then slowly peel it off, because sometimes when you just pick it up and rip, the paper actually rips. So this is also a nice paper, which is not gonna cost you an arm and a leg. But moving on to some sketchbooks, my favorite sketchbooks is the Strathmore watercolor series. Again, Strathmore, one of my favorite brands, and this is the first time that I tried this sketchbook. I never tried it before. It's not cheap. I think it was around $20. I might be wrong, but I'm gonna link all of the supplies in the description so you can check it out for yourself. And I did some Ecoline watercolor markers, and I did some watercolors, and overall I can say it takes the paint really well. And these are actually, oh, this is too bright. Oh. And these you will probably recognize as my Mother's Day illustrations for Mother's Day cards. And this was also Ecoline watercolor markers. So overall, this paper I'm really happy with. One thing is that paper does come in two different textures. So on one spread you're gonna have a more of a cold press texture, a thicker texture, and on the other side you're gonna have a not smoother, but kind of a smaller texture. So you can experiment with the variety of textures with the sketchbook. Another watercolor sketchbook that I have is the Moleskine sketchbook, and I just picked the sketchbook to do my gouache series in it. I wanted some sturdy sketchbooks with a nice paper. So I don't really have a lot of experience doing watercolors in here. I can't really say much about it, but for the gouaches I can say that it's pretty good. It holds the paint really well. And you can see some of my illustrations from the videos that I did here. And yeah, I did some watercolors here, just mainly studies. And the paper does buckle a little bit, but not too much. And of course this paper is just as a sketchbook, it's not suitable for very heavy washes, but it serves the purpose. Oh, another thing you can try, again, not necessary, but just if you're curious, you can try. One thing that I also tried is fluid watercolor paper, these small sort of tiles, and they also glued on two sides. And this one is hot press finish. I don't remember why I got this pack. I think I was working on projects and some abstract studies. I don't remember, but I still have some of it left. Also, very nice paper. And another thing that I'm still experimenting with are the watercolor postcards. And they are buckling. So this is what I don't like about this. Both of them, both the Honey Mule and Strathmore paper, I found them buckling. So they're probably more suitable for smaller illustrations. And I don't even have anything to show, I think. I only have one that I think I did on a Honey Mule paper, and this was just a craft paint, and it did buckle. Yeah, it did buckle quite a bit. But you can try evening out paper if it buckles. Just apply water on the other side and let it dry, and I think you have to tape it or put something heavy on top of it and let it dry, and then it evens out. But I wasn't really worried about it too much. This was just sort of abstract study. I'm gonna keep it in there. So if you're willing to spend a little more money on one of the watercolor supplies, I would recommend spending more on the paper. Paper really does make a difference, and you will be much more happier with your results on the good paper. And don't be afraid about wasting paper. If you're not sure if you're gonna make something that you will be able to keep forever, just flip the page, and on most of the watercolor papers you can still paint on the other side, and I've done that a lot of times. But don't be afraid to waste your supplies in general, because this is how you learn. But have also a separate pack of the cheaper paper, so you can practice on it and then do the final illustration on the nicer paper. Okay, now let's move on to the brushes. So the brushes are probably something that I have least of. Well, I do use a lot of the cheaper craft brushes for my gouache illustrations, just because gouache ruins my watercolor brushes. So I don't really have that many brushes that I use specifically for watercolors. These are all the brushes I use. And going by the smallest, this is 00 round brush. This one is number 3 Cotman W&N. Oh, the 00 is by Silver. This one is size 3 by Winsor Newton. This one size 4 round, also Silverwhite. This one is really nice for getting sharp edges and just nice even lines and corners. So this one is a flat one, and it's a 1/4 inch by Princeton. And these are two of my probably most used brushes, both by Princeton, and one is round size 10 and this one is quill size 6. And this brush was a little bit more expensive, but it does hold a lot of water. This is really nice for making large washes. And it also comes to a fine tip, as you can see, so you're able to get as much out of one brush as possible, because you can create a variety of strokes. You can see when I press it down, it spreads so much, so you can cover a large area with it. So the brushes is something that you can really save on. I don't recommend buying expensive brushes when you're starting out. You can get very good results with cheap brushes, and just buy a few. Just get 2 or 3. You don't really need more than that when you're just starting out. And one also nice set that I have are these water brushes. They come, and I don't remember the brand. Oh, this is Pentel. Yeah, so this is Pentel, and this is a set of 3, small, medium, and large. And these I just keep in my pencil box when I just go outside to sketch something. And these are very handy because the water, you don't need the water bottle. You just squeeze out the water from the inside, and they are easy to clean. When you switch in colors, you just squeeze out a little more water and sort of rub it on the paper towel, and it cleans it out and you can pick up another color. So these come in handy too, but these are not necessary if you're working only from your home. Another very important thing about brushes is always using a good brush cleaner. And even if you're using cheaper brushes, but especially if you're using more expensive brushes, to make them last longer, you do need to clean them with the soap. Even though watercolor is water-soluble medium, so you would think that you can clean it up with water, but there's a lot of medium inside of the paint and their pigment inside of the paint that stays right at the base of your brush, so because this is the hardest place to clean it out from. And so with time you're gonna notice how your brush starts fanning out, and that's because of all of the buildup that you're gonna have here at the base of your brush. So grab a cleaner. This really lasts you a long time, and this is also cleaner and conditioner, meaning that to preserve your brushes for a long time, if you don't use them as much, you can first rub it in. What I do is I dab the brush in the water, and then I rub it in here in the soap, and I clean it up. And after the brush is clean, I squeeze off excessive water, I rub it in here one more time, and that sort of acts as a conditioner and just preserves your brushes if you're not using them as much. I also get a lot of questions about what to sketch with when you're doing watercolors. And my primary sort of sketching tool is either just a regular graphite pencil, HB or H, but I also do a lot of sketching with Prismacolor color erase pencils, just because these pencils are not showing up as much on the paper. They're also easy to erase if you make any mistakes. And if you're using good watercolor paper, you want to be careful with erasing too much on the surface of the paper, just because they're especially sizing applied to the paper that you don't want to rub off too much, otherwise that area is just gonna appear different once you start painting. So you want to have something that you can just lightly pick up with an eraser if you make a mistake. But it also doesn't really show as much through the watercolors. These color erase pencils come in sets, or you can just pick up a few colors. They do our supply store do sell them individually. One color I use most is probably the vermilion. I also use the blue one, which I can't find right now, but this one is blue, but there's a lighter blue that you can try out too, but I mainly use red one probably. So this is another good tool to try, especially if you're just starting out and you're afraid with going in with watercolor right away. You want to make a sketch. So this is something that I would recommend. Probably not the most important supply, but well, it is important. I always use 2 jars of water. One is for cleaning my brush, and one is for clean water, to pick up clean water when I need to pick up the paint from the palette. And most of the time I didn't add anything else to the water. I didn't use any mediums. You can if you want to. I would recommend 2, sort of the 2 primary ones, and one is Gum Arabic. This one increases gloss and brilliance, and it just gives a little bit of pop to your colors. And another one is Oxcal Liquid, and this one just increases the time that your paint stays wet. So if you like working wet and wet, if you're doing a lot of color mixing directly on the paper, this is very useful. And you only need, like, I had these bottles for a few years now. You only need a few drops for a cup of water. So this one really is gonna last you a long time. But again, it's not necessary. It's just if you wanna try it. And speaking of mediums, another thing that I actually do recommend is a masking fluid. And the masking fluid, it comes from different brands. It can come in a jar or it can come in a pen. A pen is probably convenient because you can apply in a thin line, but with a pen you have to be careful because the tip does get clogged by drying out frequently. And if you buy in a jar, and one thing to be careful with the masking fluid is that do not use your good brushes with this fluid. It really does ruin them. It has sort of a resin consistency that is just gonna rip off the bristles from your brush. So I usually use my just regular craft brushes, the small ones, and these come in a variety of sizes in one pack. So it doesn't matter if you need to mask a large area or if you need to mask just a tiny branch or something. Then these craft sets really come in handy, and I'm gonna link everything in the description below. So now moving on to the color mixing. The mixing palettes, and these also come in a variety of sizes and forms. You can also use just a regular ceramic dish if you have, or any kind of aluminum tray. I see a lot of people mixing it, but the main difference if you want to buy the mixing trays is that they come either ceramic or they plastic. Ceramic doesn't get stained as much, and it does feel smoother a little bit for mixing. I don't know how to explain it, just like feels like a paint mixes better in it. Plastic ones do get stained, but it's no big deal for me, just because it doesn't really affect the mix that you're gonna apply over it next time. Just clean it up with water and it's gonna be fine for the next time. It doesn't really gonna go through to your other mixes. Now let's talk about paints. And the paint is also something that you can save on. It doesn't have to be expensive, and in fact I'm still using some of my watercolor sets that watercolor paints that I was starting with, and I don't even have the box anymore. And these are Koi Watercolor Tubes. I've had them maybe 10 years. I don't want to lie, but it's been a long time. I think they came in a pack of 12 or 18, and these are very vibrant colors, and they do give you good results. They mix well with each other. They get reactivated really well if you let them dry on your mixing palette, and they last you a long time. Look, I still have most of these. Another one, sort of a student grade palette that I tried fairly recently is these Watercolor Confection series by Prima Marketing. And I picked it up, this set, just out of curiosity. I was in Hobby Lobby and they were on, no, they were not on sale, but I had a coupon. Yes, I had a coupon, and it ended up costing me about $17, I think. And I picked up the tropical set just because I like the selection of vibrant colors. And when you have more vibrant colors, you need less of the colors, just because it's easier to mix other colors with these. And I still keep it in original packaging just because I like how it looks. It's just so cute. So this set also comes with mixing palettes. Oh, and I'm keeping my white, this is Chinese white watercolor paint from my Koi series, and this just acts sort of like a gouache paint, I would say, for just some white details. And these are the colors that come in the set. I just did a color swatch, which came with the watercolors. You just have to fill it out. And you can see the nice vibrant colors. And this is very comfortable set to bring with you outside. So whenever I go somewhere, I just take my water brushes and I take this set, and this is more than enough if you want to do some watercolor on the go. So this is something that I would recommend for the beginner artist. If you're getting more serious about watercolors, I would recommend picking out tubes of watercolors. And these are all the tubes that I have from different sets. Well, there is one set that I actually had that was, it was this one by Sennelier, and I had 8 paints. And I just dumped them all in here because I'm using them all together. And the rest I picked up separately. So the rest I have some of the M.Graham watercolors. And I have a few of the Winsor Newton ones. The really tiny ones. Because they really last a long time. And you're also gonna need some, well, if you want to, you can pick up some just empty half pans and an empty watercolor palette and just put the half pans in the palette and fill them up with your paint. Or you can squeeze them out on the mixing palette and just leave it there, just a tiny dot, and you can leave it there and let it dry. And the paints that I have nicer quality, they stay workable for longer and they can be easily reactivated at any time. So this is not really a big problem if you worry about how to use the watercolors in tubes. The reason why I recommend buying watercolors in tubes is that you can actually buy as little... Oh, I'm out of focus. What's going on? Okay. So the reason why I recommend buying a tube is that you can buy as little as 3 colors. Literally just 3 colors. So if I was buying just 3 colors, I would buy Sennelier yellow or any kind of sort of medium warm yellow. It doesn't have to be lemon yellow. So buy yellow, buy a cooler blue. You can buy phthalo blue. And a cooler blue is because you can warm it up a little bit by adding either yellow or red, but you cannot cool down the blue if it's already warm, if you know what I mean. So what's another one? And the third one would be either quinacridone red or Permanentalism crimson. So just these three colors. If I was just starting out, this would be enough. Just three colors, they're gonna last you a long time. You squeeze out just a little bit on your palette, and I would actually recommend to not waste it on the palette, but rather buy these small either full pans or half pans, the empty ones, and put them in an empty watercolor palette and just let them dry. And I actually have a video where I set up my palette, where I show how I arrange my colors, how I pick my colors, and sort of just how I set it up. So this palette I bought empty. This one is made by Lucas, and I don't even know how many colors I have here. I think I have 24 or something. The middle row is now intended to be filled out because they do not fit in there well. They pop out sometimes, but just for the sake of convenience and to have all the colors together, I just put them in there. And some of them I put in the full pans just because I use these colors most, like the earth tones or the cobalt blue or the cadmium yellow. So I put these in the full pans just because I know I'm gonna use them most. And I always keep a little color swatch, a piece of paper just with the colors that I have in here and the names, just so I can remember. Oh, and remember, if you're setting up your palette by yourself, remember to label all of your paints. Can you? Is it focusing? Yeah, here it is. So remember to label all of your paints so then later you can refill it easily and you don't have to guess what was in there. So I'm gonna link the video when I'm setting up this color palette, but remember, you're not gonna need as many colors. And most of the time I'm not even using all of them, I'm just using a few. But the tubes is what I would recommend. Buy a few, buy good quality paints, just 3 colors, but from a good brand. It's gonna last you a long time. And also, having fewer colors is a nice way to learn about color harmony, because that sort of unifies your color palette for the painting that you're working on. So once you set up your paints in the set, what I recommend doing is doing the color chart. And this one is huge just because I have 24 colors, but it's very easy to make. You just list all of your colors in rows and columns. So these are the same colors, they just repeat themselves. Technically you can only do one side. This is sort of the mirroring side, but it's easier for me because I can go either as rows or as columns. So you set out your paints, and then you set out your paints here, and then you just start going by one color. I started with lemon yellow, and I would take lemon yellow and put, how many I have? 23 other colors, so I put 23 dots on my mixing palette. And then I was picking out all of these colors one by one and mixing them with lemon yellow. And that's how I was getting my mix here. And then I moved on to another color, the cadmium yellow. So I would have less, so I have 22 dots. So I put 22 dots of cadmium yellow and set them up on my mixing palette and start introducing all the other colors one by one and one by one. And so you would have to mark it twice. You mark it here and you mark it here where your colors intersect. So if you have less colors, this of course is going to be easier to do. This took me probably the full day to make, but it's very helpful. And another helpful resource is just having a simple color wheel. This helps me a lot when I'm choosing the color palette for my painting or any kind of illustration. It doesn't matter if I'm working with watercolors or oils or acrylic. This sort of helps me keep my color harmony together when picking up the main colors for the painting. And it does have the split complementary, the triad and tetrad color harmonies, and they have the explanations for everything. And it's called a pocket color wheel. And I do take it with me to the classes that I teach a lot. And it's also good for beginners to remember what colors are the opposing colors, because those colors are obviously the ones that do not mix well. But on the other hand, if you wanted to saturate green, for example, then you can see right away that the red is the opposite of the green, so you would use red as your desaturating color for the green. But the color theory is a whole different conversation that we can probably tackle at some point later. Another thing you can try is watercolor pencils. And this is probably the only set of watercolor pencils I have. I don't really use them as much. I got this one just out of curiosity, and I was pleasantly surprised. These are Staedtler 24 watercolor pencil set, and they don't have the colors here, but they are very vibrant and easy to work with when you're wetting the watercolors. So how you work with the pencils is that you would color in like with any other pencil, but then you go in with the wet brush and you wet the pigment that you applied with the color pencil, and that sort of becomes a watercolor. So you see I haven't used them much, but these are also would be nice alternative for coloring on the go, I would assume, because you don't have to take your watercolor set. You would just take your watercolors and possibly just water brushes and do some study that way. So this, again, just some extra stuff if you want to try out. I don't buy any expensive watercolor pencils just because I don't use them as much, so this was just for an experiment to see if I like them or not. Oh, another thing to keep it handy is just a small spray bottle, because usually when I'm just opening up my palette before painting, all the colors are dry, obviously, so I just take my spray bottle and I spray them, and while I'm setting up the rest of my stuff, it helps to sort of reactivate the paints, and they are ready for me to paint when I'm picking up any of the color. I don't have to really work it as much if they were dry. So this you can get from the dollar store. I don't even remember where I got this one from. Okay, so this is it, I guess, for sort of the primary watercolor supplies, but I do want to cover one more topic, and that is watercolor books. And this one that I cannot talk enough about, because I love books in general, and especially books for learning a new technique or new medium. And these are not even all of the books that I have about watercolors, because I share a lot of my books with my students, and I'm still gonna link them in the description. I will try to remember all of the books that I have, but some of these are actually from my local library, like this one, Skies, Light and Atmosphere by David Bellamy's. I'm gonna try to find it online and link it in the description. but I found it in my local library, and at least in my library you can take books for 4 weeks and then extend the loan for another 4 weeks. I think you can even extend it twice, so like 12 weeks in general, and that's enough time to read through the book. And this one is actually very useful for beginners because it has step-by-step tutorials how to work with landscapes and how to create the atmosphere in your painting. And another book from the library is more for beginners too. This is called Easy Landscapes, and this one also has sort of step-by-step tutorials and examples of how to do water, how to do trees, how to do skies. And the beginning has a few general techniques and sort of introduction to watercolors. Well, basically every tutorial here covers a different technique, so they are not just different by the subject, but also by the special technique that they're covering in the chapter. So this one is very useful too. I'm gonna try to find it online. And now to some of my books. This one I picked up recently, and this from the Urban Sketching series. This one is about working with colors, and it mainly uses watercolors as an example. And this one just comes in handy, and it looks like just a regular sketchbook that you can take with you for reference if you want to do some sketching outside, just sort of as a reminder. And it does cover pretty much all of the aspects of working with colors, from the basic supplies, like basic let me find them, the color paints, the basic paints that the artist uses, and then she goes on to different mixing examples and different techniques, and then also going by chapters, how to create mood and atmosphere, how to use a few colors. And you're gonna see one example here. I like the chapter on how to use as little paint as possible. So I did try, let me find, where's my sketchbook? So I did try to replicate this illustration just to work sort of with a limited palette, and you can see she used I think alizarin crimson, Hansa yellow, and ultramarine blue. And I had the colors from this watercolor confection series. You don't really know the exact names of the pigments, they kind of go just by numbers. So I had number 18, number 21, and number 23. And this is the variety of colors you can get just from these three. And I did this painting, and I did this illustration, which was a copy of this one. And I was really surprised with how many different colors, and especially neutrals. How many different neutrals you can get from just a few colors. So again, if you want to start out with minimum amount of supplies, just get a few color tubes. You don't have to buy huge sets. So this, the Urban Sketching series actually has a lot of the other books on more sort of technique oriented subjects like perspective. I'm blanking on what else they have, but they're really nice. I'm gonna link this one, and when you follow this, I'm sure you're gonna see the other books from this series. So the next one is not a book, but a very useful resource. It's the Watercolor Artist magazine, and my library local also has these watercolor magazines that you can borrow from the library and read it, and just I think these are only for 2 weeks or maybe 4. I don't remember exactly. but I borrowed this one from the library, and then I saw this one in the store, and this one has a chapter on color written by the author of this book, the Shari Blockhoff. I don't want to butcher her name, but she's Canadian artist, and these actually handbooks series, they are all written by different artists that specialize in something specific. So she specializes in sort of using watercolors in urban sketching, and she also has a separate article in this magazine. So you can subscribe to the magazine. It's going to be much cheaper than buying each individual issue, but I just in general like this particular issue, so I decided to purchase this one. Another useful book for beginners is Watercolor Plein Air, and this one also goes over a lot of sketching in watercolor outside, but this is very useful for beginners because the artist begins with just the basic, like the value sketches, and starting with sort of more of the gesture drawing and being loose because you're painting outside and your setting is constantly changing. And he also has different chapters on supplies and composition and using shapes and using colors. So, and just his artwork in general is so interesting. So this one is also very highly recommended. I'm gonna link in description. And moving on to a more serious books, this one, Watercolor Painting, more about the thought process behind watercolor painting. In this book, you're not gonna find any of the specific tutorials, but this does cover everything that goes into the watercolor painting. How to start, what to think about, how to prepare for watercolor painting, how to tackle different situations. And one of the main points I picked up from this book is working from general to specific, working with bigger shapes and then narrowing them down to specific, and also thinking in layers, using as little layer as you can to avoid overworking, and also just how to plan everything ahead. But he uses also artwork from different artists, and it's nice to have different approaches, not just by one artist, so you can kind of maybe find something you relate to more. Yeah, so this is also very highly recommended, very nice book. I haven't finished it yet actually, because I'm just taking it slow and I'm just soaking all the information in. So this is also another great resource, and I will try to remember all of the other books that I gave to my students, and I'll link them all in the description below because there are also some good ones in there. So I think this is it for my watercolor supplies. Let me know if you still have any questions. I'm gonna try to think of everything that I talked about and link it all in the description. And let me know if you have any further questions. Ask them in the comment section below. I might not get to it right away, but I'll try to answer them as soon as possible, or maybe even make another video about something that I've missed in this one. So I hope you enjoyed it. Share some of your favorite supplies in the comments too. Let me know if something that you tried and you really liked that you want to recommend to others, and we will see. Maybe I'll try something else based on your recommendations. Okay, I'll see you in my next video. Bye!